Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight for our incredible retail discussion entitled, You Can't Just Buy It Online. There are many questions about the future of retail in light of certainly many empty storefronts in Westfield and other Main Street communities around the country, which tonight's panel hopes to address. For some context, here in Westfield, we are in many ways the victims of our own success, having benefited from many national chain stores which opened here and have now suffered disproportionately from the transition to online shopping. The pandemic has only accelerated the trend, as many of the stores we lost recently were national chain stores who are already suffering nationally. Our historic reliance on national chain stores and the foot traffic they brought made the town a bit complacent, and therefore we did not proactively plan for the shift in consumer buying patterns. I am often asked, as I was leading up to tonight's event, about the success in other towns. Specifically, people bring up Cranford and Summit, and what can we learn from their success? The reality is that both of these communities, along with many others that people talk about, they actually have the same challenges. But they also, what's different, initiated their own redevelopment planning over 10 years ago in order to diversify their local economy, and they're now reaping the benefits in many cases. As much as we might want easy solutions to our vacant storefronts, there is no quick fix. Blaming the landlords for overcharging on rents is convenient and in some cases justified, but it is not the answer. Lowering rents, if even possible, does not fundamentally solve our downtown challenges for the long term. Simply put, seeing that Band-Aid solutions are not the path to success and instead require planning and vision. I always tell people downtowns are comprised of their own ecosystems, and successful downtowns require an ecosystem that supports the businesses sufficiently enough to sustain them organically. This means that we need people living, working, and shopping in our downtown with adequate parking to support them, so where we are less reliant on weekend visitors to drive the local downtown economy. Fortunately for us, Westfield is now poised for our own reinvention, and we have been busy laying the groundwork for our own redevelopment efforts over the past 3 years. In that time, we have adopted a new townwide master plan, designated every municipal parking lot a redevelopment area, and designated Streetworks Development as the redeveloper for the Lord & Taylor properties and the North and South Avenue train station parking lot. You might know by now, because we've certainly talked a lot about it, Streetworks is not only a nationally renowned planning and development firm, but more importantly for us, as a subsidiary of the Hudson's Bay Company and owner of the Lord & Taylor properties, they are Westfield's largest property owner and vested stakeholder. Which brings me to tonight's discussion. A key component of our planning efforts is tied to understanding the future of retail and ensuring that we are creating an ecosystem that will support and attract today and tomorrow's retailers for the long term. So to that end, and to have this discussion, I'm thrilled to introduce tonight's panelists. We first have Bob Zuckerman, and hopefully many of you guys are familiar with him by now. He is the executive director of the Downtown Westfield Corporation since March of last year. His timing was impeccable. He started the month we shut everything down. But luckily for us, he also serves as the president of Downtown New Jersey and is a small business owner himself in South Orange, where he also serves on the board of trustees. Previously, he served for almost 6 years as the executive director of the South Orange Village Center Alliance, their equivalent of the DWC, and as executive director of the Lower East Side Business Improvement District in New York City prior to that. So luckily for us, Bob has this great context for what's happening around the state, places that he is bringing to benefit us. After Bob follows, Richard Heaps will follow, and many of you have heard from Richard by now. He is a co-founder of Streetworks Development, is a nationally recognized expert in the planning and design of urban mixed-use developments with 30 years of experience in cities around the world. Richard has directed planning, design, and public consensus building for more than 50 main streets across the country, many of which have been recipients of National Awards of Excellence. As a developer, he led the creation and public education effort for the $285 million Blueback Square mixed-use development in West Hartford, Connecticut, and he's also managing the creation and public consensus for the development's $2 billion redevelopment of downtown Detroit, which has certainly enjoyed quite a renaissance over the last 10 years. We're also joined by Michael Byrne. He is one of North America's leading experts and futurists on downtown and Main Street business districts, as well as the retail industry more generally. As the founder and president of MJB Consulting, Michael has amassed 20 plus years of experience in conducting market analysis, devising tenanting strategies, and spearheading implementation efforts across the US, Canada, and the UK. He's a sought after college lecturer and presenter and keynote speaker at industry conferences and has consulted extensively across the US and New Jersey in particular. Many of you are familiar with another panelist, Bill Abramson. He's a licensed planner, attorney, and CEO of Topology. He is our redevelopment planner. He brings 15 years of experience to his work, a significant amount of which is spent building Topology, which he founded in 2014. Prior to Topology, Phil served as a planner development manager in the New York City office of Jonathan Rose Companies. If you've worked with Phil, you know he is an entrepreneur at heart. He's known for his innovative approach and creative problem solving and tapping into his various skill sets, including law, business management, urban planning, technology, public policy, and design thinking. And he gets that because he has the trifecta degrees from Rutgers, including Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice, a Master of City and Regional Planning from the Blaustein School at Rutgers, and a JD from Rutgers School of Law. So quite an incredible panel tonight. And kicking us off is going to be Bob Zuckerman. Over to you, Bob.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brindle. I appreciate that very much. As the mayor said, I kind of bring a unique perspective to this discussion because of the different hats that I wear. So yes, I am the executive director here in downtown Westfield of the DWC, but spent several years in South Orange before that and New York City before that. So I've been at this for quite some time. I also serve, as the mayor said, as president of Downtown New Jersey, which is a nonprofit organization that focuses on the downtowns in our great state and how to help them and how to make them succeed and prosper. But I'm also a small business owner. I co-own an all-natural pet store in South Orange called Pet Wants. So I have that experience, and I kind of have retail in my blood. My dad was a retailer. He and his brother had at one point 20 stores in the sort of off-price discount women's apparel. Some of you who may remember back in, if you're old enough like I am, you remember he had a store called Finders Keepers. I think the closest one to Westfield was in Linden, if my memory serves me right. So I kind of have retail in my blood. But this topic is called this forum is called You Can't Just Buy It Online. And retail today in 2021 is very, very different from retail, from the retail environment back in the 80s when my dad had his stores. And I'm just going to give you some examples of what those of us who work in place management industry and who work in downtowns and work in urban planning really consider retail today, because it's not what you might think. We do, of course, have a number of traditional retail stores. Our first slide, thank you, Trinisa. Our first slide, or the next slide, actually shows one of our great success stories. Patricia and Paul. Patricia Hannigan is actually serves as the board chair in our organization. But if you've been to Patricia and Paul, you know that they have amazing fine oils and olive oil and balsamics. And it's traditional retail in the sense that you walk in, you buy products, you give the clerk a cash or a debit or credit card, and you walk out with the products. And that's, the traditional retail as we know it. But Patricia and Paul is definitely one of the landmarks in Westfield, and actually they are are opening, in the process of opening, a second full store in another town. So my hat's off to them for everything that they've been doing. This slide shows you something that's very unique and different. This is called Selfie Stations NJ. And how this came to be is the property owner of this location here on East Broad Street had an Ann Taylor store. And as most of you who are watching this know, a lot of people, women who frequented Ann Taylor, they closed, unfortunately, most of their stores last year, including the one in Westfield. But that didn't stop. That didn't stop our property owner, Mr. Ward. He actually took this space and turned it into a place where you can go and actually take selfies in 20 different separate booths, like you see there on the left. The picture on the right is a close-up of one of them, and it's a great place to have parties, and it's not just popular with teenagers, as you can imagine it would be, but also with adults who come in. I went in with a whole bunch of friends about a month ago, and we just had a blast in there. And that's retail. Selfie Stations is retail. Um, Here is another example. This is AR Workshop, which, if you have not been, is on North Avenue in our downtown. And AR Workshop, which is a franchise but is locally owned and operated, is a do-it-yourself home design studio where you go in and make products like signs, like you see here, and banners, and all sorts of different home accents, and you make it from raw materials. And they have classes for both kids and teens and adults. And AR Workshop is what we would consider retail today. Another example. So this is one of our more recent business openings in our downtown. This is American Dream Tattoo Studio. Yes, it's a tattoo studio. We don't call them tattoo parlors anymore. They're studios now. Why? Because the artisans and the who create these tattoos are literally artists. They are. This is not your old-fashioned tattoo parlor. A lot of folks said, "Well, why are we bringing tattoos into a downtown with such a storied history as Westfield?" The answer to that is really simple. Almost 50% of millennials have at least one tattoo. And so the market has been growing and growing, and they are really prospering in our downtown. And here's another example of retail. You're probably going to hear from my colleague Michael down the road a little bit later in this forum about bricks to clicks. This is an example of clicks to bricks. So Custom Ink is going to be opening a store in the next month or so on Quimby Street in downtown Westfield. And it is a business that started solely online, where you would go online and order custom hats and shirts and backpacks and sweatshirts with custom logos and all sorts of unique designs. And now they have open stores, and they're opening one right here in our downtown. So this is retail as well. So as you can see, retail spans the gamut now. It's not just walking in, buying goods that were put on a shelf and walking out with those goods. Retail means a lot of different things. And to explain that a little bit in more detail, I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague from Streetworks, Richard Heaps. So Richard, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Bob. And it's great to be here. I love seeing those new ideas. That is what retail is all about. And I love the mayor's term of ecosystems. I could not explain what your downtown, any downtown that has retail in it, it's an ecosystem. It's living, it's dynamic, it's organic, and it's all the things that you would expect. It's a verb, it's not a noun, it's not a thing, it's a way to be. And I think there's nothing more critical. So people say, well, Richard, let's just talk about what it is. Okay, we've shown you lots of pictures and whatever. Here's my super simple explanation. It's wherever there's an interaction between a consumer and a product or a good or a service. That relationship, very important, is what I would call retail. By the way, a food truck is retail. A lemonade stand is retail. A bicycle rickshaw is retail. But right now in the world of retail, there's two camps of conversation. One's about buying, one is about shopping. Buying, which is e-commerce today, the Amazons, etc., is all about having 24/7 access. That's new in retail. You're going to probably save money. It's going to be convenient, and you're probably going to have available more things. Seems pretty fun at first. So you've been doing it for a whole freaking year, like all of us have. And you don't have what you have from shopping. You don't have any interaction with a staff person or a pair of clothes or whatever it is you're buying. And with brick and mortar, when you buy it, you own it, and you walk out the door and it's under your arm or it's in a bag. You get customer service. You have questions, you need some advice. And it is the way all products today are doing shipping and returns at a brick and mortar place. So once again, it's that interaction between a consumer and a product. Now here's where we are today, which Bob was talking about. We're stuck in the middle. Not stuck, we're exploring the middle. Most of the e-commerce folks are exploring, like Bob showed you, a physical presence. So they can do those things, interact, and have a relationship with their customer. Many shops, built shops, are now exploring how to have an online presence, what we call omnichannel. So it is all of these things. Here's just very quickly some of the e-commerce folks that are having to move over to the physical side to reconnect with their customers. You got Warby Parker here in Westfield. Starbucks has a new concept called Starbucks Reserve. If you hear that there's one nearby, go see it. It's wild. And Indochino, I don't know who's heard of that. This store has your measurements in it, and you want a workout suit or whatever, you go in, you pick out your fabrics, and they make it custom designed to your shape and sizes while you're there. It's an amazing thing. And so I want to just focus on 4 pillars of great competitive retail. And I want you to see at the end that Westfield has all 4 of these and it's fired up and ready to go. First and foremost, it's place-based. These are authentic, one-of-a-kind, public, mixed-use places that give that retail value. The retail in Westfield get tremendous value from that place. Number 2, which we don't talk about a lot, although we should, in our Main Street, we expect 50% of them to be food. Food is the glue. We have a sidewalk cafe, farmer's market, festival street. I think the quote here says it all. Food brings people together on many levels. The soul, the body, it's about love. So it has a love place. Number 3, it's experience-based and it's fun. Look at the quote by Howard Schultz of Starbucks down there. He says, you walk into a store, whatever it is, if there's a sense of entertainment, excitement, electricity, you want to be there. You're not going to get that, with all due respect, on Amazon.com's webpage. And finally, and most importantly, the concept of long-term value orientation. It's omnichannel, it's local, you get customer service, you know people, you have a relationship with them. Those are the things that make fundamentally foundational centers to retail. And so I wanted to put that up there because the reason that we at Hudson's Bay are so excited about being involved with planning some of the next things in retail is you've got that. You've got those underlying principles. It's not a strip center. It's not a crappy mall. It's a very, very special place, and we're excited and ready to go. I'm going to lead you in with that handmade definition of retail and to Michael Bird, who's in town working with the town to help bring some order and some next generations of thinking. Michael, take it away.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, well, we hear the phrase new normal a lot these days. A lot of forecasters who are assuming the future's just going to be an extrapolation of the present. But the one thing we know for certain is that, at least in retail, it won't be. Retail has always been, and especially now, that most intricate and fast moving property type there is. It does not stand still. It does not move in a straight line. It twists and turns. It often goes in directions that most people never would have predicted. Yet much of what you're hearing and reading these days assumes it will move in a straight line. And that's what will get us into trouble. And that gets me to one of my favorite quotes. I know it will be the second time you've heard Mark Twain already. Ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. And I'm going to be returning to that theme in the forthcoming slides. Next one. All right, so what do we know? Well, obviously, downtown Westfield's had a relatively tough year. That's not unique to it. In fact, many other downtowns that are very similar to Westfield's across the country have experienced much the same thing. Just one example there, downtown Wellesley, outside of Boston, also affluent, vibrant downtown. They've also struggled in terms of keeping their national brands. There were 8,800 chain store closures in 2020. I'm sorry, there's a misprint there. That was following 9,900 in 2019. So that's a lot of retailers that are in transition right now. Next slide. But we need some perspective on this. Back in April 2020, a lot of people were fearing that this was going to be what was called an extinction level event for downtowns. And there was some grounds to be worried, indeed. It hasn't been fun. It has been very difficult. It has not been an extinction level event, far from it. In fact, those 8,800 chain store closures, actually, if you can keep to the slide I was just on, those 8,800 chain store closures I mentioned, that's compared to the 25,000 that had been expected as of April 2020. Okay, so again, that's a lot of stores that closed, nowhere near as many as had been anticipated. Similarly with restaurants, you undoubtedly read one article, if not more, saying that 110,000 restaurants closed across the United States in 2020. And you said to yourself, wow, that's a lot of restaurants. Well, that's a lot of restaurants in absolute numbers, yes. That's less than 10% of the total that have permanently closed, which compares actually not all that badly to the 8% in an average year. We all know restaurants are a very risky business, even in the best of times. And also, in addition to the 110,000 closures, there were nearly 70,000 openings in 2020, including 19,000 just in the fourth quarter alone, which was actually just 4% less than in the fourth quarter in 2019. So again, not great, not extinction level. So there's definitely some need for perspective. Now we can go to the next slide. So you might be asking, well, how is that possible? How did they do it? And especially with small businesses, how did they do it? Because what's amazing, and this has been my experience anecdotally working across the country over the last 14 months, is that the downtowns that were heavy with national chains actually fared worse than the ones that were heavily small business. So you might be asking, well, how is that possible? Well, there's a number of reasons. There are some clear themes that emerge. Obviously, outdoor dining and to-go alcohol sales made a big difference for food and beverage. Cannot underestimate the impact of PPP and other forms of government relief and stimulus. An enormous amount of money was poured into the economy. An enormous amount of money is being poured into it this year. That has made a huge difference, all hiccups notwithstanding. A lot of business, to their credit, they were very resourceful. If you look at AR Workshop, they started selling their DIY to-go kits, for instance. Other businesses, they found alternate revenue sources besides walk-in traffic. Ono Bowl's good example. They started selling produce boxes, for instance. Community goodwill was a major factor, a recommitment to our local merchants, and in some cases, very successful GoFundMe drives. Receptive landlords. Let's just accept that there are actually a lot of good ones out there who really were willing to come to the table with concessions to help their tenants stay afloat and get to the other side. And finally, eviction moratoriums. That certainly was a very helpful safety net. Those aren't the only reasons, but those are some of the most common ones. Next slide. And what's even more exciting is that there's better days ahead. And there's a number of reasons to believe that. First of all, in a very Darwinian sense, the businesses that we're left with today after the last 14 months are rather simplistically your strongest and most resourceful ones because they've made it this far, right? This has really had a way of separating the wheat from the chaff, or at least the well-capitalized from the not so well-capitalized, which augurs well for their continued ability to stay afloat. Again, still a lot of government relief that's going to be pumped into the system this year and into next. Mass vaccination, pent-up demand, that chart on the upper right, that shows the savings rate in this country. And the savings rate skyrocketed in 2020, particularly among the kinds of affluent households that predominate in and around Westfield. With all that stimulus money, a lot of that was just put into savings accounts, which now can be used to feed that pent-up demand. Entrepreneurial energy, economic downturns in general tend to be periods of high entrepreneurial energy. This one, according to the data, has been no different. There's been a huge increase in the number of new businesses. And even the ones that already existed, there are a lot of retailers, ones that are a little healthier in their balance sheets, who see this as a golden opportunity. And they are taking that opportunity to expand and to secure real estate in some markets like Westfield, where ordinarily it is very difficult and expensive to do so. Channeling Warren Buffett, be fearful when others are greedy. That is rule number one of how you make money in business. And so that's why you see so many retailers who are maybe a little bit puzzling to some of you, who are saying this is the time to really put the pedal, really put their foot on the gas pedal, and take advantage of the opportunities in front of them. Next slide. So what about e-commerce, you say? That's always the elephant in the room. Well, let's unpack that a little. Back in April 2020, we were hearing these forecasts that we're going to have 10 years of e-commerce growth compressed within whatever, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. Well, you know what actually happened in 2020? Online market share rose 2 percentage points. It went from 11.8 to 14.0, right? Which is amazing to me. When we were all on our couches at our kitchen tables, it rose 2%. Maybe we were approaching the ceiling to consumer demand. There are only so many things we feel comfortable in, we feel comfortable buying online. But actually, an even bigger part of this is the unsustainable cost structure. And this is discussed very little in the popular or even the business press. The reality, the incontrovertible truth that e-commerce from a business perspective is one big money loser. Let me say that again. E-commerce for a merchant is a money loser, right? I'll tell you a statistic which will shock you. Amazon, okay, considered Amazon's been around for 27 years now. It is by far and away the biggest e-commerce retailer there is. It accounts for 50% of all e-commerce sales in this country. It barely ekes out a tiny profit on e-commerce. Almost all of its profit is from the cloud. And you're like, really? Yes. Go to the next slide. There's a number of reasons why this is. The three most important ones are that shipping is really expensive. That's number one. Two, a website does you little good if no one knows you're there. So what do you have to do? You have to pay the ransom that Facebook or Google demand for advertising, right? For Google search, for search. And there's also returns. Generally speaking, people return about 9% of the merchandise they buy. When they buy merchandise online, they return it 30% of the time, right? Big difference, huge cost for a retailer. The only way retailers can make the numbers pencil is by clicks and bricks, right? Let me repeat that. The only way they can make the numbers pencil is if they have a robust online presence and a network of physical stores. And that's why you have seen over the last 5 years, every digitally native retailer, including several of them who swore back in 2013 they would never open a physical store, having to eat their words and rolling out physical stores, including even Amazon, right? Amazon now has bookstores, 4-star stores. They own Whole Foods. They've got these new Go convenience stores. Now they've got an entirely new mid-market grocery banner called Fresh, right? Now they haven't proven to be very good at brick and mortar yet, but the fact that they have been rolling these out very aggressively should tell you something, right? Next slide. And this gets to a larger point that retail and storefronts are not just about selling things anymore, right? They're about doing all the other things which can help you to make overall the numbers pencil. So visibility, right? I said it doesn't do you much good to have a website if no one knows you're there, right? And you don't want to have to pay Facebook or Google to advertise, right? It's actually cheaper to just open stores, and that becomes your advertising. That becomes your visibility. That becomes your way of getting and staying at the forefront of people's minds, right? Fulfillment, right? Think about it. When someone buys a product in a store, they buy it and then they take it home, right? The consumer is responsible for what's called that last mile, right? Now, when you order something online and then it's shipped to you, the retailer actually assumes the responsibility, assumes the cost of that last mile. And rather than shipping everything to a store, they have to ship all these tiny packages to all these tiny addresses, enormously expensive. When you have a store, however, people can come to the store to pick it up, right? They could buy it at the store, or they could order online and pick it up at the store. And even if they're ordering online and getting it delivered, the retailer can deliver it from the store, which is cheaper, right? So for all these reasons, fulfillment is much cheaper with storefronts. And again, returns for the reasons that I mentioned. And, you know, Bob noted earlier, Custom Ink. That's an example of a business that was originally online, but they said, you know what, if we're going to sell these custom tees, well, we need people to know who we are. So we need a storefront. Jackrabbit, another example. They use the back of their store to hold inventory. These are retailers that are seeing storefronts as valuing storefronts for very different reasons than simply selling things, right? Next slide. And this gets to a larger point. You know, I'm kind of excited right now because I see a reason for believing that downtown storefronts, which have historically been very hard to fill, partly because they're really deep, right? Remember, a lot of these stores were built 100 years ago when retailers kept their inventory in the back, right? And then once retailers no longer kept their inventory in the store, the backs were no longer very useful for anything. So what retailer wanted to take the whole space, right? They only wanted the front. So these spaces would stay empty, these deep bowling alley spaces. Well, now with all these other uses to which storefronts can be put, whether it's for fulfillment, right? You know, whether it's for ghost kitchens, whether it's for all sorts of other uses besides just selling things, well, suddenly those deep storefronts, maybe they have a new life. Maybe those 6,000 square foot floor plates that we are supposedly saddled with in downtown Westfield will come back in vogue again. And this quote here just shows you that all of this goes in cycles. And I mentioned this with respect to Cranford, right? This was a quote from a New York Times article in 2004, right? About why Westfield is such a more appealing location for a retailer, for brand name retailers, than Cranford, right? And you read it and it's kind of interesting now looking at Cranford a very different way as, oh, we want to emulate Cranford. Well, back then they really wanted to emulate Westfield, right? Well, right now you think, okay, Cranford's got the upper hand. Well, actually that is not really true on the ground. And the point I'm making here is that these things go in cycles, right? And back then Cranford wanted to be Westfield. And now a lot of people in Westfield seem to want to be Cranford. And what I'm saying is that with these larger, deeper spaces that downtown Westfield has, we might be getting to a place, well, wait, Cranford might be saying, damn, I wish we were Westfield again, right? These things go in cycles. You have to think long-term with all of this. Next slide. Okay, I just want to make a few points, and then I'm going to give it over to Phil. So what about Westfield? Well, in retail, we have this concept called a trade area, right? And a trade area basically refers to where most of your customers come from. And so I kind of sketched this trade area based on where the competition is. And within this trade area, you see in this map, Westfield reigns supreme, right? Everyone in this trade area is going to be more likely to come to downtown Westfield than they are to Short Hills Mall, to Downtown Summit, to Menlo Park, to Bridgewater Commons. This is a polygon that downtown Westfield has all to itself. And downtown Westfield is far more of a preferable location than any other downtown or shopping center within that polygon, right? Next slide. And what you realize at first, there's a good 220,000 people who live in that polygon. That's a very big number, right? That downtown Westfield has all to itself. And furthermore, before we believe that there's no future for clothing, shoes, and all sorts of soft goods in downtown Westfield, look at how much sales leakage downtown Westfield can conceivably capture. What sales leakage means is that's spending in these categories that you and the other people living in that polygon are spending outside of it. You're spending at Short Hills, you're spending at Menlo Park, you're spending at Bridgewater Commons. But downtown Westfield is still the more centrally located place for you to buy these things. So conceivably, downtown Westfield has $146 million it could capture that it's not currently. That's a lot of opportunity. Next slide. And to me, it's not so much about consumer demand, really. The consumer demand is there. It's about having the right operators, okay? You want to be with the tenants that are expanding, not contracting. And the reality is that sometimes it's just a changing of the guard. Francesca's and Taylor both were in Chapter 11. Both were struggling long before COVID. Those aren't the ones that are growing now. Yes, it might hurt that we lost them, especially if you were the core customer for either of them, right? But that's a natural progression, a natural evolution in retail. And the important part of this is you just have to pick the right operators. And these no longer are. Next slide. The operators that are tend to be concentrating in certain categories. For one, there are these digitally native brands that I talked about, and a lot of them are seeking out Class A suburban towns like Westfield. That's why Warby Parker is there, right? Especially with cities having emptied out during COVID, that's where they're going to be focusing on for the coming months and years. But also treasure hunt concepts, anything where you can buy hidden gems at steep discounts. It includes off-price, it includes resale, it includes consignment. These sorts of formats have lost a lot of their stigma, and also they're relatively immune to e-commerce, right? So you know, whether it's Janus Closet or other sorts of treasure hunt concepts, those are the kinds of operators that are growing and that will continue to grow in the months and years ahead. Next slide. And also seeing not where the puck is right now, but where it's headed, right? Which is a famous Wayne Gretzky quote about why he was such a good hockey player. He looks for where the puck is headed. And in retail, where is it headed? Well, let's look at this. With department stores fading, if not closing entirely, a lot of brands need somewhere else to sell their products. They don't have a Lord & Taylor anymore that they can sell them in, right? They have fewer Macy's in which they could sell them. So they have choices. Well, they could go online and focus there. And as I said before, there are a lot of challenges there. Or they can open their own stores, their own standalone stores. In fact, many of them have been. Coach, Levi's, Nike, they have all taken that approach in recent years. Or if they have neither the capital nor the inclination to do that, they will open in one of these newer breed department stores that are emerging. Neighborhood Goods is an example. There's only a few locations so far, but it's kind of the same concept of providing a platform for brands that don't want to open their own stores, right? And it's just kind of a new version of that same format. And again, it's picking the right operators, right? And those sorts of department store 2.0s will be out there. There is a clear need for them in the supply chain. Next slide. Okay, if you can go 4 slides further, I'm just going to finish up so I could give it over to Phil, because it looks like I'm nearing the end of my time. We could talk about some of these other slides afterwards if people are interested. I get into a little more of the food and beverage, but I want to make sure. So let's go back to Mark Twain, and I just want to leave you kind of with an interesting trajectory for one particular category. Okay, so a lot of us, especially if you have a certain age, you remember the movie You've Got Mail, right? Do you remember that movie where Meg Ryan, at her peak cuteness, owned this little children's bookshop, shop around the corner, right? And that store was going to be overwhelmed by Tom Hanks' new Fox Books, which was supposed to basically be Barnes and Noble, right? Okay, well, so shop around the corner presumably disappeared. Then we had Fox Books, and then came Amazon. And then we had a period where the Fox Bookses of the world started to disappear. And you had this weird thing where people were mourning the loss of the Barnes and Noble on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, as if it was that original independent bookseller. But Amazon pretty much decimated big box bookselling as well. And here you had this weird sort of situation where people still wanted their bookstores, but they weren't willing to pay for them. They still ordered their books on Amazon, right? Okay, so now we're in about 2013, and everyone figures there's no future for brick and mortar bookselling anymore. Well, a funny thing happened. Borders disappeared, Barnes & Noble shrunk to half its size, and into the vacuum stepped independent bookstores, the number of which rose every year from 2010 to 2019. And it got to the point where, you know who else started selling books in brick and mortar stores? Amazon, right? So if you look at the way this all went down, I don't think anyone would have predicted that the category would have evolved in this way, and it would have evolved in a way that ultimately benefited downtowns and brick and mortar retail more generally. Last and final slide. What we do know is that retailers are not standing still. They're not staying the same. We hear a lot in retail today that retailers have to learn how to meet customers where they are, right? And what that basically means is they got to pour more money into online, because that's what consumers seem to want to do. And hey, that's certainly what we have been doing for the last 14 months, right? But that's not what visionaries do, right? And, Steve Jobs certainly did not resign himself to meeting customers where they were. He said, I'm going to figure out where I think they want to go, and then I'm going to give it to them. And by the way, that involved a lot of physical stores. And he wasn't the only one. At Whole Foods, a college dropout named John Mackey, he's the one on the right in that picture to the left, transformed the humdrum business of buying groceries into saliva-inducing theater, revolutionizing the supermarket industry in the process. Meanwhile, in building the brand of Starbucks, a former kitchen equipment salesman from Brooklyn, Howard Schultz, effectively created a whole new third place in American society that very few people saw coming. The true visionaries who birth from nothing that which we take for granted tomorrow are the ones who show consumers what they want before they even know they want it, right? And they're striving, just like Jobs, Mackey, and Schultz did, to build better brick and mortar mousetraps. The future belongs to them. You might not yet recognize their names. Most of them do not work at the so-called legacy brands like Ann Taylor or Victoria's Secret or Lord & Taylor, but they're out there. And for the reasons I outlined earlier, building robust networks of physical stores is most assuredly part of their vision. And you can take comfort in the fact that when they do, downtown Westfield will be at or near the top of their list. So now I'm going to give it over to Phil, and he's going to back cleanup.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And thank you all for being here tonight and for the opportunity to be here. My name is Phil Abramson. I'm the redevelopment planner for the township, or for the town, sorry. A lot of people ask me, what does it mean to be a planner? What does a planner do? And the answer is, I don't really know. Every day is different. But what do we make? We usually make rules at the end of the day. We write zoning. So we will be the ones ultimately writing the zoning for Streetworks and HBC. And so I started to think about all these things that I've learned, from Michael and Richard and Bob in preparing for this. How will this impact our zoning, and what will we as a municipality do in the redevelopment plans? So, it's not a new normal, but new world, new rules, right? So thinking about some themes that I saw come out of this, and it's about flexibility, it's about focus. And what do I mean by that? Focusing on what matters, focusing on outcomes. What do we care about? And that just requiring some sleepy old retail just because you could buy a pair of socks there doesn't make the downtown great. So the question is what will and what does, and we heard a lot about that. And then forward looking, a lot of the things that Michael talked about, it's like, where do these things land, and what will they do to our town, and how do we write zoning for this? My mind is just spinning right now, so those are some of the things I'm going to talk about. And really in terms of being flexible, it's I'm sitting here thinking of this Bonnie Raitt song, I Can't Make You Love Me, right? That the customers, the community will drive and pull the retailers and the tenants into these downtowns, and we can't zone and say you can only do retail here and therefore we will have a great retail downtown. That's not how it works, and I'm going to tell you why, or I'm going to show you an example. So Trinisa, I'm going to rely on you to keep me going here, so just feel free to change slides at the timing that you pick as appropriate. So here's kind of the epicenter of the heavyweight champion, right? 3 or 4 or 5 national retailers within an eye shot of each other at Elm Street and Broad. And then, should we go to the next one? Around the block, boom, an entire block of vacant retail. Literally, like 100 feet away, we have, and why, right? Because not all streets are created equal, not all frontages are created equal, and we have to stop acting like they are, and we have to stop zoning and making rules as if that's going to make them so. So let's go to the next one. So the planning community, it was interesting because I have been part of the planner dogma that we have to have retail on the ground floor, only ground floors, active communities, vibrant downtowns. We have to do this. And having this conversation I ended up doing some research and found out that this has been going on for quite some time. In San Francisco, 2017, they were struggling to fill retail spaces. Grand Rapids recently rezoned half their city to not require retail. This idea of fluid space is an article on Forbes that was just floating around social media over the past couple of weeks, talking about we need spaces that are more flexible. We as planners need to be more flexible when it comes to zoning. Thank you, Trinisa. So okay, I got you sold on the flexible thing. Now let's look in the crystal ball. Where do we go? And what do we need to do? And I think that some of the things I just want to talk about, and really the whole point of these Facebook Lives, is to begin to create a vocabulary and an understanding that when we go to the real thing, when we're at the town council meetings and we're actually having hearings, that this is not the first time that you're hearing some of these big ideas. So it lets us talk about big ideas in this safe place. So if we could just go back, sorry, Trinisa. So some of the things were supporting the core retailers. What kind of ground floor uses would we do if we're not going to do retail? What will the ground floors look like? What are some of the new opportunities and some of the market trends out there? So, okay, now we can go, and I'll go faster, I promise. All right, so I was on a panel, I did a big project with Bob Zuckerman in South Orange, and we sat through for a year with the retailers there, and they said, well, if you can't carry potholders out of that store, it's not retail, and I don't want it here. I only want to have my store with other retailers. It's like, great. I don't want to have the daycare here. I don't want to have the whatever. Eventually, everybody came around to the idea that it's about wallets and it's about customers, and the mom or the dad who's dropping their kids off at the tutoring center will ultimately go and buy a pot or a pan at the kitchen store, and the dance school and the escape thing and the hatchet and the virtual reality lounge and whatever else. Getting people here in the downtown creates that vibrancy, creates those opportunities for the tenants and the retailers. It's good for business. And so just because you can't buy a pair of socks doesn't mean that it's not good for the economy there. Next one, please. The other thing that we can do as a town is great public spaces. So Times Square, a lot of people would from out of town would go there and be like, okay, where's the square? There is no square. What is this place? It's just like literally a traffic nightmare. And you could see, look at the humans on the left-hand side. Look what they're doing. They're squeezed and cramped into these little sidewalks, having to like get past each other. Like this is like from a post-COVID, I'm like getting you know, itchy looking at that picture. And then look on the right-hand side. It's people are hanging out. Like we created a space for them. Those are the people that are going to spend money in the downtown. Those are the people that are going to create vibrancy, not the ones who are trying to like dodge taxis and, you know, not fall in the subway hole. So this is what we can do. This is the things that are in our control, that we lead the way as a town by creating great infrastructure and great urban design. Next one, please. Okay, what will be some of the things, and these are all West Coast examples here, but so some of the things that we will look at, and that I think that we need to be open to, this idea of live-work units, which I'm showing you on the right-hand side, stoops and porches, residential. Like there are some, if you go to the West Village, which is like, I think some of the most beautiful downtown neighborhoods anywhere, like you turn the corner on the side street and all you have is great stoops and porches. Like it's good, it's okay. Not everywhere has to be a bunch of open glass storefronts and or lounge spaces. And it matters. And this is what I meant about, let's focus on the things that matter. It's about the quality of the space. It's about the quality of what's going on inside the building. It's about the vibrancy. It's about the quality of design, not necessarily that it's retail for the sake of retail. This is another idea. And, you know, this might not come onto my plate doing your redevelopment work, but just something that in Paris, they're talking about the 15-minute city, that everything you need should be within 15-minute walk of where you live. And it got us talking as a group about, well, what about the Northside Kitchen? Like that's retail, that's something different. That's something cool and interesting about Westfield, that, you know, where retail becomes literally an amenity. I live in Mountainside, I'm your neighbor to the whatever, west or something. And where can I walk to? Nowhere is the answer. So these are all towns around us, Maplewood, Morristown, Caldwell, Westfield, that you can walk out your door and go and grab a gallon of milk. Like, isn't that a beautiful thing? So maybe we think about retail a little differently. We put it where it matters. We put it where it matters the most to people. Let's go to the next one. So these are some of the things that that Michael went over. These are my last two, but just that there may be things, and like I call it like ostrich planning, and so many towns do it, that you put your head in the sand and you just hope that nothing bad happens, and you know, but nobody prepares for it, and it's like, oh my God, like how did we end up with this DoorDash kitchen? It's technically a restaurant, but there's no windows, and like, you know, what the heck? So these things are called ghost kitchens. They're purely Uber Eats, Seamless Web, whatever kitchens that or restaurants that have no dining rooms, and they're purely there for that. I think it's a cool idea, but it needs to be in different places. And then kind of looking at that, as Michael was talking about, that we as communities may need to start thinking about e-commerce as players in e-commerce, and that we need to define the truck and delivery routes and where do the hubs go, and that you have all these different carriers coming in at different times of day. That can there be things that municipalities can do, and they're doing this in other states, where they're creating hubs for those things to happen, and then for the single carrier to come consolidate everything and bring it around. So, you know, there are possibilities out there. There are companies out there offering fulfillment as a service, where they come in and build infrastructure in a supermarket and make it into to an e-commerce shop. So thank you all for your time. Always a pleasure to be in Westfield.
Thank you, everybody. And I actually, I'm sorry, Bob, I'm going to jump in because I had a question, and then I think Trinisa, I think we might have some questions that came in. But I'm sorry, Bob, not to jump on you, but I did have a question that I really wanted to hear from maybe Richard and Michael and potentially Phil before we jump into some of the questions. And, you know, I think, Michael, you might have said, or maybe Richard, like the one thing I always hear about Westfield is that you've got good bones. Like Westfield has good bones. And it's not something that you can create. It's just inherent to the history of the town. And when we figure this all out and put all the right mix together, that our potential is significantly greater than maybe other surrounding communities because of the good bones. Do you guys, who wants to talk about that and what that means and where that opportunity is and why? Michael, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. You know, I think that oftentimes, you know, the expression good bones kind of refers to the physical characteristics, the architecture, the road, you know, the network of streets and alleys and downtown Westfield. It certainly has an intact downtown. You know, and I think, but also good bones, you know, if you think about it a little more broadly, you know, in retail, as with so many other things, there's a real incumbent advantage, you know, at least among retailers. You know, it's a very risk averse industry. And retailers tend to gravitate to what's already established and strong. And you know, as much as say Cranford has grown in the estimation of people, and you know, over the last 5 to 10 years, you ask anyone actually in the retail industry, it's not even a conversation. They're two entirely different animals. Downtown Westfield is the undisputed Class A location in this trade area, right? Cranford is doing a lot of things right, and especially in food and beverage. But for a certain type of retail, it's not even a competition. And so, and I think that's something to keep in mind. You know, yeah, I wouldn't put Richard on the spot, but let's say the Lord & Taylor, the HBC property was in Cranford. Would he be as excited? Would HBC have even decided to double down on that real estate, or would they have sold it? You know, it's a very different, it's just a very different animal. So I think that, thinking more broadly about good bones, I think
I am going to put Richard on the spot because I actually think that's a really good point. I mean, talk about that, Richard, because I know you guys obviously have done your due diligence on Westfield and also have the history of having a retail location here, so you understand the demographics and the opportunities. So talk about why your Hudson's Bay is comfortable doubling down on their investment in Westfield in a much broader way. You're on mute, Richard.
Mute.
Some of it's got physical issues. Yeah, you get the train in the middle of town, check. You've got some pretty great demographics. I'll tell you one of the things we've looked for wherever we've developed, in that the residential neighborhoods are attached to the downtown. They're not a downtown and then big piece of property or parking and then the residences. Downtown is part of the residences. And then I'll be quite honest, it's funky. I don't think anyone would have drawn, you'd have to tell me, Mayor, did someone draw the town like that? No, it evolved, it grew, it had growth spurts and then it retracted, and it's one of a kind. You know exactly when you're looking at the plan of Westfield, or here I'm at the corner of Elm and whatever. So now, oddly enough, in many of our work that is not in downtowns, in the suburbs, or in newer growth cities, you know, post 1900, we have to add the funkiness to it so that it is unusual and idiosyncratic, and it creates little addresses, whatever. Westfield's got all that. The best thing that Westfield doesn't have is the latest version of every stupid development idea of the past century. I challenge Cranford to say they have the coolest parking garage ever done in America. Not. They have the worst. I challenge Cranford to show me residential types that are new, that aren't like every other residential apartment mixed use thing in the world. So So I'm hoping from my answer, you can kind of tell why we're intrigued. It is a one-of-a-kind, unique place. The crime would be to do redevelopment that didn't live up to that. And I'm certainly committed to thinking, it doesn't mean you have to think backwards or historical, but you have to think in unique ways that are Westfield-like ways.
So we have some questions that some of our local Westfieldians builders were interested to post for us in anticipation for this panel. I hope that Lynn Spadaro feels that her question was answered as it relates to her query about the differences in Summit and Cranford. But we have a question from Alex Antonelli, and he asks, why are certain retail property owners sitting, quote unquote, on properties that have been vacant for years? I recently tried to connect with an owner for a downtown property, and I was told that there aren't any ready to lease yet. Work needs to be done, but yet the property has been vacant for many years. What are they waiting for? Who wants to take that one?
I mean,
I can address a little bit on some of my conversations specifically, but maybe Michael can talk more specifically about why a landlord or property owner would or wouldn't want to lease. But, and this is what I've been told in certain cases, is that it's very costly to fit out a property, right? And in terms of the expense, and many of them are looking for those that are well capitalized and have a history to make sure that they're going to do the fit out and the build out, that they've got a tenant with a proven track record that's going to stay. Some I know told me they're very averse to restaurants because restaurants come with additional trash and cleanup and things like that. And even as hot as restaurants are, they don't want restaurants. As I think Michael had mentioned earlier, a lot of them in terms of size need to be subdivided, and they're reluctant to subdivide properties before they know they have tenants to fill all of them. But I will tell you, I mean, then you have these incredibly innovative property owners like Jimmy Ward, who we mentioned with selfie stations. When that Ann Taylor left, Jimmy's like, okay, I don't know if I'm going to be able to lease this right away, but let me invest $100,000 or so in fitting out these selfie stations and let me generate revenue from this for as long as it goes and then see how the market evolves. Another good builder and landlord is Anthony DiTomaso, who owns the AR Workshop building and the bank across from Ferraro's. He's done an incredible job of fitting those out. He totally renovated the AR Workshop, put some incredible duplex apartments on the second and third floor that sold out in before they were even on the market. So for those landlords and property owners that have the vision and the willingness to invest, I think they're going to reap the benefits. And it's one of the reasons we just declared the entire downtown an area need of rehabilitation so that we could give the 5-year property tax incentive for them to reward them for investing in their properties. And I think those property owners that have the vision and understand that you have to invest money to make money will be rewarded. And I think, and those that don't are ultimately going to fall behind. And I think that in and of itself is going to create some change in the marketplace. But Michael, I don't know if you probably have more of a larger impact on that.
Yeah, well, there's certainly there certainly was a movement afoot before COVID in a lot of cities, but even some suburbs, to look at tools like commercial vacancy taxes, so as to supposedly create a disincentive for property owners to keep spaces vacant. It was based on the notion that the only reason a property owner would keep spaces vacant, or that they were actually keeping spaces vacant deliberately, was because there was, I think the narrative was that there was some tax advantage to doing so because you could take a deduction. I don't really know where that theory came from. I could conceive of instances, especially larger property owners, where maybe they might do that. And there are certainly no shortage of landlords that are, if not greedy, then maybe a little unsophisticated in terms of what rents are really sustainable in the given market. But there are lots of other far more benign reasons why spaces remain vacant. Sometimes it's a matter of capacity and bandwidth with the property owner. These are not people who necessarily do this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. they have full-time jobs, and they just happen to own buildings in high visibility locations. So, there's lots of other reasons, and vacancy taxes seems like it can be rife with unintended consequences to me. So, it's a dangerous game to be playing. But yeah, there are a lot of other reasons that are far more likely than the notion they're just waiting to get a deduction by keeping their space vacant. If you think about it, why would you keep a space vacant and earn less revenue because you could then pay less taxes? It's like, I'll take lower income, so I have lower income tax payment. That, it's just not very intuitive for the most part. So.
Thank you, Michael. Our next question is coming from Harvey Davidson. What is preventing downtown, in their quotes here, Westfield, from being an enclosed open pedestrian mall as described in a proposal by Mayor Brindle and Richard Heaps?
Well, I really want to talk about this. I will tell you that when I was in college learning to be an architect, closing main streets for pedestrian malls was the latest and greatest thing. I lived in Boulder when they were doing Pearl Street, one of the best known. My last year of college, there were at that time 128 closed streets in America, of which only 8 didn't reopen to cars over the course of time. So I would give that the award for the most old-fashioned idea of the night. And I've done my fair share of those. What is most interesting right now are, I forget what the word is, Phil, fusion, or this kind of world where things are everything at once. We've been designing festival streets for the past 20 years. What is a festival street? It's one that can change as the situation changes. You do not need the same street at 8 a.m. on Monday that you need at 8 p.m. on Saturday. And there's huge opportunities to have the street change and have a new pair of clothes and ramp up with candles and quiet down for Sunday morning. And I think that's where the opportunity is to have really one-of-a-kind unique places. And guess what? You have the seeds of one in adorable little Quimby Street. Oh, I love Quimby Street, and it's doing it the old-fashioned way. Tenants are trying to see what it's like to serve outside. Oh my God, but I need parking. Oh my God, I need deliveries. But what about Saturday? That is what's going on in the urban environment. It's fun. It's specific to a special place. And I think that's some of the stuff we're looking to explore in our sites in Westfield. And very importantly, you need somebody like Bob and the organized group, because it takes a lot of work, right, Bob? But if you can do it, and you look at the towns in that part of New Jersey that have done some little thing like that, they don't fail because they're not trying to make every design fit every circumstance. And so, Harvey, my message to you is let's think about it. Let's look at what we can do. But the last thing we want to do is turn Westfield into an enclosed pedestrian-only mall.
Hey, Trinita,
Yes.
can I go back to Lynn Spadaro's question about Cranford and Summit? Because I did want to make a point, and I actually wanted Phil to weigh in on that.
Do you want me to read it, or you?
Yeah, go ahead and read it again.
Lynn Spadaro asked, can you please address all the vacancies in downtown Westville? What is being done to work with landlords to fill the empty storefronts? Summit and Cranford do not have this issue. Also, what is being done about the high turnover in town as well?
And it goes back, that question about empty storefronts, we can kind of close where I began, which is about this ecosystem that you need to create where you're driving ongoing foot traffic at various times of day, just not on the weekends. And I'm going to let Phil talk about Summit because he's a redevelopment planner in Summit, but I know Summit, because of their proximity to Short Hills Mall, never had these big chain stores. And so they're always kind of hustling for independent stores. So While we were living high on the hog with chain stores, Summit and Cranford for that matter had to innovate beginning 10 plus years ago. Summit built a parking deck, and very importantly, they built recent office buildings. I know Morristown has too. I think Boston Consulting Group and McKinsey are two folks who have regional offices in Summit. And when I met with the Summit mayor, she'll tell you, you go there on Mondays and Fridays when the consultants are in town and lunch is packed. Many of them have bought houses in town. So that is the office space, and working downtown is one big component that I know Summit has done very well. And Phil, maybe you could talk a little bit more specifically about some of the things they've done there.
Yeah, actually right now at this very moment, there's a redevelopment hearing happening in Summit that one of my colleagues is covering. And, there we thought a lot about what would be the types of retail, what would be the types of uses that would support and be the fuel to drive Springfield Avenue, the main street in Summit. Not to compete with it, and we've been very, very cautious about that, but how to, empower it, how to complement it. But the thing that I think is important, especially like sort of what we've all lived through as a country, what we're going through now, where people talk in hyperbole, data is really important and facts matter. And that I know that there's a perception that every other town than the one you live might be doing better than the one you're living in. But I'll tell you, I'm sitting in the rooms with the downtown groups. I'm sitting with the mayors. I'm sitting with the council members. I've been the planner in Morristown for 12 years. I've been in Summit, in Chatham, and now in Westfield, and we're in Cranford too. And everybody talks about each other like they're way better. Everybody looks at the other towns like, oh my God, did you see what they're doing? I wish we could have the chain stores that Westfield has. Why does Westfield get all the good retail? Summit has the same insecurities around their vacancies. Cranford has the same insecurities around their vacancies. So let's focus on us. Let's focus on Westfield and do the best thing for Westfield. We heard all these reasons tonight why this community is so well positioned. I did not grow up. I grew up in New Jersey. I didn't grow up in this immediate area. My wife is from here, and we go to Westfield, and I'm like, I never understood this place. Like, why? How come all these like chains are here? Like, we're not in the mall, but the Gap is here. Like, where am I? And but there's a reason for this, and I think it's the things that Michael talked about tonight, and those are Westfield's competitive advantages. And Richard's job will be to play to those things. And to make sure that we deliver on the strengths of Westfield, and I will hold him to that.
And
Can I just chime in here for one sec, quick? I just want one quick point. So my mom used to live in the 80s and into the 90s. She lived in Verona. Verona doesn't really have a downtown. It was Bloomfield Avenue, but it's not a traditional downtown like ours. So when I would go visit her, where would I go, or where would we go to lunch or dinner, whatever? It was usually Montclair. Now, everyone talks about Montclair now as if it's the cat's meow. It is the place to be. It's city meets suburb. And Montclair is great. It is great. Montclair in the 80s was not great. Let me tell you, there was vacancy after vacancy. The restaurant scene was nothing. This work takes time. That's the point that I want to make. And Mayor, you've been in what, 3 years? You've been in office. Mm-hmm. This work takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. And because there was no redevelopment here for many years, that's why you just had sort of status quo. So I just wanted to really hone in on that point because I think it's really important.
Thank you very much for that, Bob. And I have to tell you, yes, sitting in this seat, it takes a lot longer. Just the process in and of itself is, in terms of the cadence of council meetings and ordinance changes and statutory requirements, it's a little bit different from the private sector where I came, and it's taught me patience. But I also am very, very excited about what's coming. I have to say, thinking about our future is what kept me sane and in a good mental place over the last 12 months, because I was focusing on the sorrow of the present, but about the excitement of the future that we're building. So I hope everybody leaves this conversation as optimistic as I feel about the potential and future of Westfield. And just really grateful to all of you, and very fortunate that we have the best and the brightest working on behalf of our town.
Leading the town, Mayor.
So I think with that, right?
I think that's it.
I think that's it. So thank you all. I know we ran over on time. Thank you all for joining in. Thank you for your participation, and let's go Westfield.
Yay.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Right.